Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Mariama, Chair of Livable Raleigh. Welcome. Thank you for taking time this evening to join Livable Raleigh's virtual community conversation. What's next for democracy in Raleigh? Before we get into the program, let me take a few moments here to go over some housekeeping details. All microphones will be muted during the program. We will take questions posted in the chat and from the floor as time allows. Our moderator tonight is Bob Geary, and he will be asking the questions you have submitted and allowing the guest panelists to answer. If you want to ask a question from the floor during Q&A, please utilize your hands raised feature, which is part of your dashboard of options. We will do our best to answer all hands that are raised during the Q&A portion of the meeting, but we will also be keeping an eye on the clock. This meeting will be recorded, and the recording will be posted on the Livable Raleigh website in the Community Conversations section. Livable Raleigh has intentionally kept this meeting informal so that we can all participate in a community conversation. As with all previous Livable Raleigh meetings, we are modeling excellent community engagement. Maybe I don't need to remind you, but I will. We have been denied a community engagement forum by this current mayor and council for more than 20 months. It is important for organizations like Livable Raleigh to be an excellent model of community engagement in the absence of any other example hosted by the city. With each meeting, we are passing along best practices for future community engagement in Raleigh. It is our hope and dream that the city of Raleigh will once again be a city that embraces open dialogue from the public and neighborhood groups who care deeply about the issues that affect the quality of life for Raleigh residents. A few quick facts about Livable Raleigh. Livable Raleigh is an all-volunteer grassroots organization made up of people just like you who love their city and who want to be sure that the decisions that are made by elected officials are made with the best interests of all of Raleigh's residents in mind. In January 2021, Livable Raleigh became a 501c4 nonprofit organization. We have published over 250 original fact-based blogs about the issues that affect our lives in Raleigh. Livable Raleigh believes great neighborhoods make great cities. Livable Raleigh's mission is to inform and engage the people of Raleigh. In 2019, only 13% of eligible Raleigh voters turned out to vote. We want to be sure there are more informed and engaged voters who turn out to vote in this next city election, currently scheduled for over a year from now in November of 2022. One last point. Livable Raleigh will be making an exciting announcement after the Q&A tonight. We hope you will stay with us for that announcement. Now I will turn the floor over to Bob Geary, who is a member of Livable Raleigh's Advisory Committee and Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. Take it away, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I'm Bob Geary. Joining me tonight are Wanda Hunter and Barbara Smalley McMahon, both of whom are dedicated advocates for economic and racial justice in Raleigh for many years. We're also honored to have Bob Hall, co-founder of Democracy North Carolina, with us as well. I'll begin, and if you would hold your questions until we've all spoken or put them in the chat, we'll answer as many as we can as time permits tonight. So tonight's program is about democracy in Raleigh. And at the outset, I want to underscore that word, democracy. To us, democracy works only when there's active citizen engagement and informed citizenry. Citizens can take part in their own government and understand what decisions are being made and by whom and why. If citizens are pushed out of government, it's just not a democracy. So next slide. This is what we see of citizen engagement in Raleigh today. Sadly, it looks to us like a dumpster fire. Since taking office 21 months ago, our city council has done everything they can think of to push citizens to the sidelines of their own government. They've cut ties with the network of citizen advisory councils, replacing them with essentially nothing. This is critical. And more recently, our council cooked up a deal with the General Assembly in secret, with citizens cut out entirely. And the result is that city elections were postponed 13 months, and runoff elections were eliminated even then. 13 months in November of 2022, we'll have an election, but we won't have runoffs. That was the culminating and last straw of a series of events for us, and persuaded us to launch an effort to have a recall election next year for Mayor Baldwin. We'll talk about that as the last topic on the agenda tonight. I do want to say that this recall, the rules for a recall in Raleigh, would allow Mayor Baldwin to be a candidate for re-election, just as she should have been before she managed to get her re-election campaign postponed. So citizens sidelines, elections put off, and in the meantime, developers and the development industry have been given free rein. I mean, our mayor actually works for the development industry, and that's no exaggeration. After her election, Barnhill Contracting, a giant construction firm, put her on their payroll as, and here I need an irony alert, Director of Business Development. She is the mayor of Raleigh, and her job is developing work for Barnhill. She put together a citizens task force, so-called, and it recently recommended higher salaries and longer terms for her and the council. Head of the task force, a lawyer who I see is with us tonight, Eric Braun, whose career was working for developers. His ally on this task force, the former CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Now, developers have their place in government, and we want good development in Raleigh, but good development occurs when the development industry and citizens work together to find mutually agreeable projects. We need citizens pitching in, and we especially need citizens who aren't rich to have a voice with their council and their mayor. Letting developers build whatever they want, wherever they want, is not how Raleigh got to be a leading southern city. We did it by working together in, that word again, a democracy. So citizen engagement, what purpose does it have in city government? Well, first of all, I think we can stop density sprawl with better citizen engagement. We can also engage citizens in the project of creating affordable housing in neighborhoods, housing that fits with the character of the neighborhood. We can stop gentrification, which is rolling across East Raleigh, ridding it of affordable housing and replacing it with unaffordable, expensive new houses. We believe high density development will work well for Raleigh on transit corridors, but we don't think high density development should be allowed in every part of Raleigh. I would say that if we allow high density development anywhere in Raleigh, as we're doing now, we will have parking decks full of cars. It will not lend itself to transit. And the traffic congestion, which is already bad, will continually worsen. That's what you get when you have high density sprawl. So livable Raleigh, as Susan said, we started in January of 2019, right after the election, for one reason, because we noticed that developer money had dominated the election and that the candidates who won got a lot of it, led by Mayor Marianne Baldwin. Council member David Knight from District E raised most of his money from developers. Sage Martin got a lot of money from developers. I think we all remember him, unfortunately. and lesser amounts for the other members of council. It should be said, David Cox in District B and Corey Branch in District C didn't really raise that much money in their campaigns and got very little money from developers, but the others, very significant amounts. So in February, a month after we started meeting to create Livable Raleigh, February 4th, 2020, in secret, Mayor Baldwin and Sage Martin launched their attack against the Citizen Advisory Councils. Without any notice, without putting it on the agenda, Sage Martin made a motion, and it was passed by a 6-2 vote for the city to cut ties with the CACs, and there would be no CAC review of development and zoning issues. And let me pause here and say that development and zoning issues, along with police issues, are the major issues that the Raleigh City Council deals with and that citizens are concerned with. Other issues are dealt with by the county or the state. Development and zoning is at the heart of local government. This surprise motion by Councilor Martin, Councilors Branch and Cox voted no, and Indy Week, which was a fan of Marianne Baldwin's back then, said this would always carry a stink that won't wash off. So CACs were the linchpin of citizen engagement in Raleigh, and I want to say just a word about that. We have a city manager form of government. The manager is unelected. He's full-time. The staff who works for him is full-time, but the staff reports to him. They don't report to the mayor and they don't report to the council. And as a consequence, the council, part-time, they have no staff to engage with citizens, and the opportunities for citizens to participate in local government are limited. But the CACs were created to fill that gap of bringing citizens into a city manager form of government so that they could participate. So City Council gets rid of the CACs. They sideline citizens, and what's the consequence of that? The next slide has to do with Shelley Lake. So we then saw council rush to approve a series of bad rezoning cases. And I wish I had time to go through them all because there were a lot of them, but I'm just going to raise three with you. The first was Shelley Lake. City Council approved a development for high density development around Shelley Lake. Supposedly the developer was promising not to clear the trees that form the buffer between the lake and the development, but in fact, the zoning condition that council approves allows tree clearing for the development's parking lot. If that wasn't bad enough, council rushed to approve another high density development at Azalea Falls. Azalea Falls is a little jewel off Durley Road in a place where development really should be spare, if at all. We really ought to preserve Azalea Falls, but the last thing we need is high-rise, mid-rise, they're really mid-rise townhouses that require clear cutting the slope and mass grading of the slope above Crabtree Creek. Council asked for no environmental review or impact study of what this development would do, just went ahead and approved it at the developer's behest over citizen objections. So I counted the other day how many rezoning cases the Baldwin Council has approved since they took office on December 1st, 2019. They've approved 105 rezoning cases, some of them for 40-story towers, some for 20-story towers. Most of them are very significant construction projects, very few of which, if any, actually have started to come out of the ground. They've denied four small rezoning cases, but that's 105 rezonings approved in 21 months, 5 a month. The developers are obviously coming fast to the Baldwin Council to get their approvals, knowing that they'll get them. We used to have 1 or perhaps 2 rezoning cases per month in Raleigh. Now we have 5 per month. And the third rezoning case that I'll just cite, I can't go chapter and verse on it because time won't permit it, but downtown south is the big begonia for Kane Realty and the development industry. That's Kane's depiction of it. Here's the anatomy of what I consider to be a corrupt rezoning process. The council passed this rezoning 7-1. David Cox voted no. This was despite an 8-0 negative recommendation by Planning Commission. The council scheduled a special hurry-up meeting in December 2020 to approve it as a Christmas present to Kane Realty. This was a hurry-up, speed-up approval of a rezoning for the biggest project, what promises to be the biggest project in Raleigh's history. Kane projects a $2 billion plus project in South Raleigh along I-40 with up to 16,000 housing units. And by the way, Kane Realty offered 0 affordable units as part of this development. The hurry up was wrong and the process was wrong. Downtown South should be a good project, but conditions needed to be written to make it a good project. This council approved it to be whatever the developer wants it to be. So now Kane wants a TIG. A TIG is a tax increment grant. Hopefully we've conveyed that information to you over in recent months. As Downtown South is built, Kane, $2 billion project, but he'd rather not pay most of the property taxes on it. So Mayor Baldwin and her council have passed a TIG policy, again, without David Cox's vote, made to order for Kane. It will allow him to have up to 75% of his property taxes forgiven on this project for all the time that it's under construction, which he projects to be 20 years or so. He might get multiple grants from the city that would be allowed, and they will cost the city taxpayers tens of millions of dollars over a period of decades. Now, developers are clearly buying influence with Mayor Baldwin. They've made $628,000 in contributions to her in 2 years and a half, $302,000 to her in the first 6 months of this year. And 64% of her campaign receipts are from the development industry. That's through reporting on as of June 30th. Developers are also buying influence with city council. 70% of the council's campaign contributions have come from the development industry in the first 6 months of 2021. Again, little or nothing to council members Branch and Cox, and we don't have any data for Stormy Fort, who replaced Sage Martin on council, but the other 5 are favored by the development industry, put it that way. So, okay, we have citizens sidelined and we have development projects getting raced through the process, but this council will be accountable at election time, right? Well, Mayor Baldwin says, nah, I don't think we want to have an election. So we were supposed to have an election next month. Now, census delays caused us to have to postpone the election, but other local elections were postponed only to March. Our mayor made a deal with the General Assembly in secret to extend the council terms by 13 months and put off the elections to November 2022. So 8 more months than were necessary, extended her own term and the terms of her council majority without an election. This is like the antithesis of democracy. So accountable at election time? Nah, not so much. This deal with the General Assembly also ditches runoff elections in Raleigh. Raleigh only, by the way, in the bill. So Raleigh is left, we have a nonpartisan election system. We don't have any primaries, therefore, and now we have no runoffs either. So we will have multi-candidate elections for mayor and for the council seats, and the winner may not get a majority of the votes or anything close to it, but there will be no runoff to try to achieve a majority decision. So the public has a right to know, nah, not so much. this deal with the leaders of the General Assembly was a secret until boom, the General Assembly passed it. Republicans passed it, they run the General Assembly, and Democrats in the House were annoyed, and in the Senate. So I'll try to go through these dates quickly. Senate Bill 722 is the legislation I'm talking about. It had been introduced in May because of the census delays. Local elections were going to need to be postponed till we had census data to redraw districts. Not every town has districts, but many do. So bill introduced in May, it was passed by the Senate June 3rd, and it set a deadline for redrawing local election districts of November 17th. That gave local governments time to receive census data, which they have by now received, and draw the new districts by November 17th. Local elections were set for March 8th, and runoffs, if needed, set for April 26th. But meanwhile, unbeknownst to the public, on June 1st, 2 days earlier, the city council held a private meeting, and they cooked up a scheme that they were going to ask the General Assembly to pass in this secret meeting. And the scheme was to postpone our elections not to March, but to November, and to eliminate runoffs. June 8th, a week later, this is still a secret scheme, but the News and Observer is starting to get wind of it and starting to do reports about it. But it's a little too late for that, because June 9th, the next morning, the House Republicans take the Raleigh scheme, they put it in the form of an amendment, they amend Senate Bill 722, and then that same night they passed the amended bill, and Democrats in the House voted for it, but they were clueless as to the fact that the Raleigh Council had done this without any public process, without any public vote, with no public discussion, no citizen input, and in fact had done it in secret. 5 days later, the Senate gets back Senate Bill 722, which has been amended in the House. They have to pass it again. They do, and the vote is 33-14. The Republicans vote unanimously in favor, 26-0, and the Democrats, 14 oppose it, including every single senator from Wake County. Dan Blue, our Senate Minority Leader from Wake County, is irate about the fact that this deal was cooked up by the Raleigh City Council in secret, but there's nothing he can do about it. And June 28th, there's nothing Governor Cooper can do about it either. So he won't sign Senate Bill 722 as amended. It becomes law without his signature, and he too criticizes the secrecy of the Raleigh Council. So I think this is my final slide coming up. Where do we stand now? What's left of Raleigh's elections? Well, Senate Bill 722, as enacted, allows Raleigh alone to delay drawing new council districts until March 31st of next year. And we will hold our elections November 8th of next year without runoffs. It is a bleak outlook for democracy in the city of Raleigh. And with that, I'll wrap it up, and I will turn the floor over to Wanda Hunter. Wanda Hunter is an ally of mine on the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. She is a dedicated activist. She's an advocate for economic, social, and racial justice issues in Raleigh, and she represents the interests of the people of Southeast Raleigh and of Raleigh as a whole very well. Wanda, you're going to talk about CACs, I think, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, and thank you all for coming to learn and become more engaged in our city and our democracy. As we know, democracy can be defined in many different ways, which we see here on the slide. A government by the people, a form of government in which the people choose leaders by voting, an organization or situation in which everyone is treated equally and has equal rights, a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. The CACs were a great example of democracy in our city before they were disbanded, as Bob said, in February of 2020. Our CACs, they were created in 1973, and the first installation of officers was in 1974 under the administration of our mayor, Mr. Clarence Leitner. Now, he was the first popularly elected mayor of Raleigh since 1947. He was also the first African-American elected mayor of a mostly white major southern city in the US. Now, Mayor Leitner also supported the proposal by community activists to change the election method of the city council seats from an at-large model to a district system, which was later implemented by a referendum, which means they took a vote, and the community and residents here voted to change the way that the community would be engaged with electing the mayor. So in 1973, when Mayor Leitner was elected, was the first contest when the mayor was directly elected and not selected by the city council. And basically, the CACs were established to help to educate the residents about city government and provide them with better representation and input to city decisions. They had three main goals: to educate the public about city, county, state, and federal policies, regulations, and programs, to provide a structure for two-way communication between the city governments and its neighborhoods, to involve neighborhood groups in projects, plans, and regulatory changes. And when they were originally created, they were created to service 7,000 to 14,000 citizens. So as we know that the CACs have been highly criticized about, oh, it's not inclusive, oh, it's not this, but we haven't really adapted it or changed it to accommodate the number of people to which our city has grown. So they have always been an inclusive body. The structure of the CACs was that every Raleigh resident who was 18 or older was a voting member of the CAC. When they were disbanded, we had 18 CACs, each represented a different geographic region of the city. They decided on their own activities and priorities. The CAC meetings were open to everyone, with a note that you could only vote at the CAC where you resided. You could attend as an individual or represent your neighborhood at the CACs. They were nonpartisan. Also, that they were independent of the city council. So they were the only advisory board that the city council did not appoint. So the residents of each CAC region elected their chairperson and other officers. So it simply was a democracy of whatever was going on in your neighborhood or your geographic area of the city, and you got to be included in those decisions that were being made. So this is just a map of the CACs, the 19 CACs before they were disbanded, and then the Hillsborough and Wade CACs combined and gave us a total of 18 CACs. And I just wanted to give a couple of notable mentions that Mayor Leitner had challenged the CACs, and he asked them to work for solutions to community problems, knowing what was going on in your community and being engaged with your neighbors and knowing what issues were faced in your community, and look for the resolutions right there in that community. Now, Mayor Leitner said, Raleigh has involved itself in various citizen participation efforts in recent history. In addition, all city departments from recreation to planning have worked with civic and neighborhood organizations on a wide range of projects. The CAC program has added a new dimension to this citizen participation effort. That goes to show to reign true, because under Mayor Leitner's administration, Raleigh was bestowed the All-American City Award by the National Civic League, due in part to the institution of the CACs. So these were a great way to show what democracy looked like, and they were very inclusive. So by disbanding the CACs, they definitely have affected the Black communities by silencing the voices and making decisions in their own community. We have seen that it is resulting in rampant gentrification with no input from community, and it has spread throughout the city. This is just one example. Another example of gentrification here. And so what we're seeing in our city is, with our current council, our democracy is being dismantled slowly but surely. Now, downtown South is another example of how our democracy is being dismantled. Now, the planning commission are usually people who are appointed by council who are knowledgeable about that said commission. And with this particular rezoning of downtown South, our planning commission voted unanimously against rezoning. Aside from that, the council overrode the wishes of the constituents and have shown that they don't represent the interests of the people, but instead those of the developers. And so what that led to was no community benefits agreement, no affordable housing, no accountability. And then what they did on top of that was created a tax increment grant policy. Plain words, corporate welfare. So when you see that your taxes have already gone up this year, have they gone up all across the city? If this tax increment grant is awarded to John Kane, you can definitely see another tax bill in your mailbox again. As I've said on many economic development and housing calls in the past week, one thing that rang true was economic development cannot sustain itself without affordable, but better words would be workforce housing. It has to be included in that infrastructure. And we're not seeing that in all of these developments that are coming about in places such as downtown South. So as council has upzoned downtown South and they're doing all these studies in Dix Park and we're going to have all these wonderful things in this neighborhood, it's sad to say that they've done that without engaging the existing low-income neighbors. So with democracy, it includes everybody. There should always be inclusivity, regardless of the socioeconomic status of people. And this we just simply have not seen in these two projects to include everybody that was in those particular neighborhoods. We are currently experiencing our mayor, Mary Ann Baldwin, abusing her power by extending the terms with no community input, notice, or vote. Now, what happens is Raleigh City Charter gives us a recourse, which is a recall that would trigger a special election, which would give us the timely election we are all due. And as we go back to the definition of democracy, you should see here the words that are highlighted. By the people choose. Everyone is treated equally and has equal rights. Supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly, indirectly, through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. So that's where we are now in our democracy here in the city of Raleigh. And I'll pass it back to you, Bob.
That's great, Wanda. Thank you so much. That really sums it up. I want to say about a recall election that Mary Ann Baldwin can be a candidate in the recall. If we manage to get enough signatures to trigger a recall, she's free to run. The recall would not shorten her elected term. Rather, it would prevent her from extending her term without an election. So that's the point of the recall. It's not like California. Our next speaker is Barbara Smalling McMahon, who has been a leader in progressive causes in Raleigh for many years, a leader at Poland Baptist Church, among other places, one of the beacons of progressive activism in the city. She's a professional therapist, counselor, who threw herself into the fight for racial justice a decade ago in the Moral Mondays campaign with the Reverend Barber, and is still battling as a member of the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. Barbara's a good friend of all of ours. So Barbara, you have the floor. Thanks. Barbara, there?
Unmute yourself.
Unmute. Unmute.
Barbara, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I said good evening and thank you, Bob.
Okay.
I'm going to begin by saying that I met Bob Hall, who will be speaking next, in the Moral Monday movement in 2013. That was the year that North Carolina legislature passed a new monster voting law that required voter IDs. A federal appeals court threw that law, parts of that law out, ruling that it was written with almost surgical precision to disenfranchise African American voters. What you just heard Wanda Hunter describe is how Marianne Baldwin has disenfranchised Black voters in the city of Raleigh. Now, basically, at heart, I'm a storyteller. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. I used to go to the CAC at Tarboro Road. City planners would come in and say, we'd like to ask your opinion about rezoning in your neighborhood to build such and such. You should have heard the people stand up and say, not in our backyard. You're not bringing that to our backyard. And then the process slowed down significantly throughout the city. No 5 approvals per month took place back then because the people had a voice that Marianne Baldwin has spearheaded getting rid of. So maybe if the same court could rule, they would say she has disenfranchised voters with surgical precision. One of my favorite authors, if we want to know how to become white, anti-racist allies with the Black community, is Joseph Barnes. He wrote a book, Dismantling Racism, The Continuing Challenge for White America. It's a challenge for us because we benefit from every policy and practice that hurts our Black neighbors, benefits us. My husband and I moved into Oakwood in 1992. Our house value has quadrupled because of the gentrification that has gone on in downtown Raleigh and what preceded it in the years prior to this administration. White people benefit. Joseph Barnes says, unless you are following the leadership of impacted people as white people, you are voting, whether you want to or not, your own self-interest, and you are not paying attention to the interest of the people that most of us love and care about, who are our Black neighbors and other minorities that suffer in a system of domination, white domination. This is a wonderful little community along New Bern Avenue, and it's a community of duplexes. My husband and I drive by there often and see children out in the yard playing. You can see a swimming pool on a hot summer day. That thing was full. Kids had baseball bats out there. That's a thriving Black neighborhood. Raleigh transit system is coming through to mow that thing down. And also buildings are going to go up where they're not going to be affordable to people making 30% of the area median income. They're going to be homes for people that have money. If you want to get involved and become a true anti-racist, contact me because there are community meetings. I'm invited to them all the time by Octavia Rainey, who looks after her community, and others like her look after the Black community and meet all the time to discuss what the policies and practices are and what the people need to be standing up against. Please turn out to these meetings. Learn how we can stand in solidarity with the Black community. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Barbara. That was powerful. You and Wanda both speak the truth about white privilege and our unfailingly negative impact on the Black residents of Raleigh. So our next and our featured speaker, I guess, tonight is Bob Hall. Bob Hall For 50 years, more actually, Bob Hall has been North Carolina's foremost advocate for the idea that government should be for the people, all the people, and not for the corporations and the wealthy. He's never been in it for the awards, but the awards have come to him anyway from all the right places. He's won a MacArthur Fellows Genius Award. He won the North Carolina Press Association's First Amendment Award. He won the North Carolina NAACP's Political Trailblazer Award. He won the North Carolina ACLU's Frank Porter Graham Award, and he is a winner of the Governor's Order of the Longleaf Pine. In the 60s, Bob was the founding editor of Southern Exposure, a hard-hitting journal of the Institute for Southern Studies, which for years has shone a light on labor issues, environmental issues, and issues of racial injustice. In the 1990s, he co-founded a new organization which became Democracy North Carolina and headed it until 2018. Democracy North Carolina got us such major campaign reforms as the nation's first public financing program for judicial elections, same-day registration and voting, expanded early voting in North Carolina, including Sunday souls to the polls, pre-registration for teenagers to vote when they become of age. A host of these changes that elevated North Carolina from the bottom 12 states in the country for voter participation in the 20th century. We are now in the top 12 states in the 21st century. And Bob has also fearlessly written reports and filed complaints leading to fines and criminal charges against Democratic and Republican politicians and donors, from Mike Easley to Phil Berger. Bob Hall is a hero of mine, frankly, somebody I've followed for years. He is a tenacious researcher who sticks to the facts and doesn't try to embellish them or distort them. That's why the politicos who don't like him and would rather ignore him simply cannot. And the second thing about Bob is it's never about him. His work is always about making democracy real. It's about we the people. It's an honor to welcome Bob Hall.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation to join you tonight. And I learned a lot. I really did. This is a powerful program. You all have done a great service to document what has been going on in Raleigh. And I'm honored to be here. I agreed to really just make a few comments based on my own observations about the election postponement, because I was involved with a number of other nonprofit groups in watching what was going to happen with the census delay. What were these cities going to do that have district-based elections? What were the decisions that they would make, and how would they make them? Some cities actually wanted to try to squeeze in an election in 2021, thinking that they could take the census information, which was released in August, the middle of August, and get it all done in time to have an election in November. That was pretty unrealistic. Some cities were listening to the advice of a lawyer at the School of Government who was saying, well, you should just wait for the General Assembly. But that's not a advice of what a city government that needs to hear from their citizens, that needs to engage their citizens should take. You don't sit back and wait for someone else who has higher powers to just tell you what they think is best for you. I think you all have made the point, the powerful point, that under the kind of government, a city management, city council form of government, a primary role of the city council is to bring forward the opinions of the people into the debate, into the policy debate, because you've got a manager who's running the day-to-day business, who's hiring the personnel. The city council, they're the board of directors. They're making the policies. they need to be listening to the stakeholders. That's the citizens. They need to be actively out there with an outreach campaign, always. And the CACs were a prime example of how that could be done, was being done. And to get rid of it, as you've shown, is just an atrocity. That's a terrible, terrible regression. Other cities, I will tell you, when they were faced with the dilemma of what to do with the fact that the census information was going to be delayed, they held public meetings. Citizens came to there, and I know this happened in Raleigh as well. Citizens came to the city council and asked the city council, what are you going to do? And the city council would kind of slough it off and say, well, we're waiting for the General Assembly. The General Assembly was saying, we're waiting for the cities to tell us what to do. A number of cities passed resolutions. They held meetings. They listened to the citizens about what they should do. They passed resolutions asking their delegation in the General Assembly to delay the election till the spring, to provide some other mechanism of postponement, to provide a better framework for them, to give them a new pathway for what to do. But Raleigh didn't do any of that out in the open. And that's what's so galling and really just terrible, terrible practice, that they would wait and do in a secret meeting, in a secret process, and use the delay of the census as an excuse. You know, Charlotte they're not delaying their election. They're having a March election. Greensboro, these are big cities. They're not doing this. They're going to use the information. They're going to be able to redistrict. So it's just a cop-out, an excuse that they have come up with. And even then, when they were making this decision in a work group or some kind, they should have come back and had a public hearing, had a public meeting, let the public talk about, give feedback on their recommendation, whatever their recommendation is going to be, and find out whether people wanted to maintain the runoff, whether they wanted to go to even year elections. There's pros and cons to that, whether they wanted to postpone from March or go on. The Charlotte election does have the provision that they have a primary in March and a runoff because they're a partisan election. So they have to have a primary in March, and then can have a runoff in April, later in the spring. And Raleigh could have done this. They could have had the general election in March and had a runoff later in the spring when the congressional runoffs and so on will be held. So there are better systems out there. It was just a con job to say that they had to postpone the election in the manner that they did. And the way it was done in the General Assembly was also terrible, and it should not have been done. It has nothing to do with the way democratic practice should be. Respect is at the core of democracy. To not respect your citizens enough to bring them in and ask them and talk to them about such a major policy decision is deplorable. That's really my comment. So Bob, if there are other questions, I'm happy to take it or be a part of the larger panel. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Bob. So we're going to open the floor to questions for Bob, for me, for Wanda, for Barbara. And then when we run out of questions, we're going to talk about the recall election effort. And I'm going to turn the floor over at that point to Tim Niles. But I do want to underscore the point that Bob made about citizens going to council, because some of the people who are on the screen right now were among those who in early spring went to council and said, what are you going to do about the elections? Are you going to hold them on time in October, or are you going to postpone them to March? We thought those were the only two options that the General Assembly was entertaining. And the mayor told us point blank, we're not talking about that. And of course, on June 1st, it turns out not only had they been talking about it, they had been talking to their lobbyist to go downtown and talk to the legislative leadership, all in secret, to cook up this scheme to postpone Raleigh's elections and get rid of the runoff, and did it not just under cover of darkness, but with the falsehood that they weren't talking about it at all. So we're open to questions now, and
Bob, we have two questions, two people. Jenny Kay has her hand up, and then Josh Bradley wants to ask a question after that.
okay, so Jenny Kay, where are you?
Right here.
Okay, good.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank all of you for eloquently speaking and really being able to, identify the issues in a very clear, concise manner. Really, I feel like I'm learning so much. I think we all kind of have our opinions and things like that. So I'm going to do a little bit of outward processing so I can understand. So for you, Bob, right? Is it Bob?
It's Bob Geary and Bob Hall, so you're
Bob
gonna have to
Geary.
be more specific than that.
Bob Geary,
And not the guy with the white beard either. That won't help.
My first question is for you. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing for the recall, but we do know that there is election fraud that happens all the time. I mean, it just happened in California with the recall over there. So what are your words of encouragement for if we were to actually have a recall and actually go through the process? What makes you think we won't have election fraud, especially with the voter ID being, not recognized and not taken into consideration?
Well, that's just really a very good question, and I'm going to let Bob Hall try that one first, because if there's a better expert on state election laws than Bob, I don't know him, and I'm not an expert on state election laws, but I can talk about the local election. So Bob, you want to tackle that one?
Hello.
Election fraud in a recall election.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't have any special expertise on the recall election.
Okay. Well, let me just say.
I'll wait. I'm going to make. Go ahead.
No, you go, and then I'll say.
I think the recall process is sending a powerful message to begin with. So really, no matter how this all turns out, you all are sending a very strong message to your city council and your mayor, not only this one, but the next ones, about it's a wake-up call that you're sending.
Thanks. Let me say, Jenny.
Sorry, go ahead. So after you speak, Bob Geary, I had one more question for Wanda.
Okay, so let me say this about a recall election in Raleigh. The rules in the Raleigh City Charter for recall give the responsibility for running the election, if we get enough signatures, to the Wake County Board of Elections. We have a long history in Wake County of very clean elections run by a bipartisan Board of Elections. We've never had politics taint our local elections in Wake County, and that's been under Republican leaders in the county and Democratic leaders in the county. So I have high confidence that if we actually have a recall election, it will be clean. Now, the other question about it is, what will the turnout be in a recall election? And that will fall to all of us to make sure that the general citizenry knows about the election and knows what the stakes are and gets out and votes. So you have another question for Wanda?
For Wanda.
Hunter?
And so, Wanda, thank you so much for explaining what gentrification is. I really had no clue. I always knew what it was, but I didn't really understand like the wording for it. So I moved here from Miami. I have always lived in like low-income neighborhoods. And by the way, I'm not politically correct at all. So I've always lived in, working class neighborhoods. I mean, whatever, like that's just what I'm used to. So I guess my question is, you're seeing all of this happening, right? And you're seeing how this is affecting the working class, particularly the Black community, for sure. But we were promised by Mayor Baldwin and so many other Democrats, this is why so many of us do vote Democrat, I'm just going to be honest, because they care about the Black community, the Latino community, and all this other stuff. But it seems like they're the ones that are allowing more and more of this gentrification, and they're not, like, this is something that I try to reach out to people about all the time. Like, they're not concerned about our neighborhoods at all. So for Wanda, who do we hold accountable, and how can we support you to hold these people accountable? And like, what do we do about this, basically?
So I say any person that you elect, you hold accountable. That's part of your job. So for me, when I think about voting, it's not just a one-way thing. You have to cast your ballot, you have to hold electeds accountable, and then you also have to get people who are in your best interest to run for office. So me, myself, I am not a Democrat because of the specific reasons that you just listed. And so regardless of whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, you should be held accountable on which side, which wing you fly on. It doesn't matter. You should be held accountable. And you should also, as the community, we have to hold ourselves accountable to hold them accountable. And so that's how it works for me, because whatever I bestow upon you, I have to set that same example myself. And so that's accountability. And that's something that we lack. We think that we go to the poll and we cast a ballot and then it's over with, but that is not the way that it works. And you can see this right now in the city of Raleigh. We have to cast our ballots and then hold them accountable. And if that means going to city council meetings, going to these planning meetings, being in these special interest meetings that they have. And of course, there are going to be at inconvenient times for working class people, because, you know, if you work a working class job, usually you're not available at 10:30 in the morning to go to a meeting on terms and term limits and things of that nature. So you just don't have, you know, that availability to be there at those important meetings. And I think that's by design, because they only want the input from certain groups of people. And so that's what I would say, is that voting, it takes more than just casting your ballot. And so you have to get civically engaged. And one way to do that was the CACs. And that was on a neighborhood, in a neighborhood manner. So it didn't mean that you had to jump into the city as a big municipality, but if you knew your neighbors or what was going on in your respective community, then you could get involved in what was going on, you know, in a couple of blocks around you, and then start to learn more, and then go further and further, you know, up the ladder as more engagement.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Wanda. I will say, Jenny, that partisan labels don't tell you very much in Raleigh. Every single member of the city council and the mayor are Democrats. But the deal they hatched in the General Assembly was with the Republican leadership. So what's that about?
That's insane. So I guess, yeah.
Well, let me, yes, it is insane. So let me, I haven't forgotten about Josh Bradley. Where are you?
And we have a couple of other questions coming in the chat. So yeah, let's move on to Josh if we can.
Okay. Josh?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of questions. Friends in the struggle, trying to use my words better. The law that extended the law that changed the election date, did it specifically extend the terms of the people that were in the council?
I mean, yes, indirectly, it said they would serve until the next election,
because
which
pressure
they set for November 8th.
Because pressure should be put on the city council that once their elected term ends, that they should make nothing that's not an emergency, and deal with anything that's not an emergency, because they were elected for a 2-year term, and those 2-year terms end, and then they don't have a mandate at all. And I think pressure hopefully will be put on the sitting council to not do anything that's not directly related to an emergency, that they don't have a mandate to do, right?
Okay, that's a good point.
I mean, I know they're very, very much development over democracy, and I think it's important. It's important not to use this unelected mandate them to continue to rush stuff through, because there's absolutely no way the citizens can hold them accountable in any way if they're not until the next election, which will give them,
Yeah,
you know, an
I
extra
think
year.
I think that's a great point. Is there a question coming out of that?
But well, I was just asking if there was specific, if the legislation specifically extends their terms, or do they just assume that it extends their terms because they delayed the election?
No, it specifically extends them, and they could go back to the General Assembly now and say, "Gee, we're embarrassed. Gee, what a terrible thing we did. How about moving our election back to March 8th?" That's entirely possible. They're just not going to do it. I will say I went to council a few weeks ago and suggested they do that, and the silence was deafening at the other end.
Bob,
I am corrected in the chat. David Knight is an independent, not a Democrat. So we have 7 Democrats and 1 independent.
Okay, well, thank you.
Who else we got?
Bob, we have several questions in the chat, and one of them is kind of related to what you were just talking about. What can Raleigh residents do to change parts of the new Raleigh election laws? Do we have to work through the city council, or can we go around them?
That's a great question. Is Tim Niles here? I think he is. And there is a possibility in the city charter, and we had to dust off the city charter to find the opportunity for a recall election. There is also the opportunity in the city charter to initiate a referendum and change the form of government. You remember Wanda said that in the 70s, I guess, we changed from a form of government where every council member was elected at large to a system where some of them were elected at large and some from districts. And that was an initiative out of the Black community, because prior to that, all the council members were always white, because the majority of Raleigh was white. And that change was made by citizen-initiated referendum. Tim, am I getting that right?
Yes, yeah, I am here. I can give you a quick on that. First of all, you can go to Livable Raleigh's blog page, and Eric Braun has talked about the study group. There is a blog out there about the study group, and it explains this referendum process and tells you what parts of the form of election city council can do on its own, what parts of it requires the General Assembly. And so, yes, with 5,000 signatures, the citizens can put a referendum on the ballot to change the form of election. Also, City Council itself has 2 choices. If they decide to change the form of election, they can just do it on their own, similar to the way they moved the election on their own, and therefore it happens. Or they can put it on the ballot and ask the citizens to vote on it themselves to see if the citizens, which do you think they're going to do? But so there are those 2 options. If the citizens were to get their 5,000 signatures before the council takes action, then the citizens referendum would hit the ballot first, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. If the council goes ahead and just enacts changes to the election on their own, the citizens have 30 days to gather 5,000 signatures and force it to a referendum for a vote before it takes effect.
Okay, and neither you nor I are a lawyer, let alone an election law specialist. I don't think we can change the November 8th.
No, it's too late to
date. That's set by state law.
The date is set by the state. That's not one of the things.
Right.
One of the things that the city can do on their own is change the number of councilors, change the length of the term from 2 years to 4 years.
Right.
So those kind of things that they're getting ready to do, they can do on their own without asking the citizens, or they could, miracle of miracles, engage the citizens and put it on the ballot for a vote.
Ask the citizens. Wow, that'd be something.
Novel.
That'd be good. That'd be great. Other questions, Steph?
Yeah, here's one. Do people trust Mayor Baldwin and her entourage? Do you trust them with the decisions they've made and the people who they appointed to various commissions? Maybe that's.
Wow. Anybody want that one? I trust them to do what the development industry wants done. I think they're a very reliable tool of the development industry. And that, development drives growth in Raleigh for good or bad, or something in between. But my whole point with my presentation is this council and this mayor are working for the developers' interests and not for the citizens' interests. And the developers' interests have to do with what the city will be 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. Has very little to do with what the city is right now. And right now, we have needs that this council is not addressing, from traffic congestion to potholes in the streets, to stormwater problems all over town, to police problems all over town. So no, I don't. I'm not a fan of this council. No.
Leon Cook has his hand up to ask a question.
I want to piggyback on the question that was asked about whether you trust some of the commissions that have been appointed. One of the biggest one that's disappointed me is the Planning Commission. I used to look forward to monitoring the meetings there. But lately, over the last 2-3 months, all the votes have been unanimous for whatever the particular rezoning issue was. There used to be dialogue, particularly from 2 or 3 of the commissioners, in reference to affordable housing, whether it's good for the neighborhood that it's being done in, etc. That's not being done anymore. As a matter of fact, some of the petitioners are saying we didn't consider that. So I have no respect for a lot of the people that are now on the council, because on the commission, because others have been replaced by people who are more compliant to the city council's wishes.
I agree with you, Leon. Let me ask a question that's on my mind of Bob Hall. We're straining to try to energize citizen engagement in the politics of the city, and frankly, it's like rolling the stone up the hill. We have poor turnout in elections. The CACs were effective to a point, but turnout in CAC meetings was spotty unless there was a big rezoning case, and then it would swell temporarily. But how do you've been in this fight for a long time at the state level and at local level too. How do you get people energized to pay attention to their own government and not think it's a hopeless cause?
It's an ongoing struggle in a lot of ways, and people do ebb and flow and come in and out. I don't think it's to be unexpected. I think Wanda made a good point about the fact that voting, your responsibility as a citizen doesn't end with just going to ballot box. People do need to stay engaged, but you have to bring it to them often, and you have to bring it to them in terms that they understand and feel affected by. So I think the neighborhoods where all these decisions are being made, canvassing them with your whatever it is you're wanting to do, you have to go to people. You have to have team. You have to go to their meetings. You have to go to their churches. You have to go to who their leaders are and talk to them about how does this connect with what you're already doing, and see where it resonates. It's organize, and it's a lot of hard work. There's no way around it. And with the pandemic and people not answering their phones, and it's not getting any easier.
I think
others may have other thoughts.
Yeah,
I'm sure you got some good organizers on this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, coming from an organizer standpoint, it's basically about assessing the needs of the people. Because if it's not something that frankly affects that person at that point in time, then you won't get them to be engaged. And I think that the pandemic has definitely shown that. And the way that organizers have definitely navigated that is to find out what the needs are, the needs of the people are at a certain point, meet those needs, and also engage them in what could change that need-based opportunity. And so just being able to navigate that and assess the needs in those communities respectively for which community, because in Southeast Raleigh, the needs are not going to be the same as Northwest Raleigh. And so being able to address them and break it down so that people understand it on their own terms of how it affects their everyday life when they cross their threshold every day is basically the way that you get people to get engaged. I do this all the time, talking to people in Eastern North Carolina, and they're like, well, how do I get the people engaged? I said, well, what's going on in your community? What is the big topic in your community? What are people in your community worried about? What are they losing sleep over? What is it something that you need to organize around to better in your community? And once you find out those specific topics, that's when you get people to become engaged, because they are concerned about what's happening in their life. They're not going to convert their lives to be concerted around civic engagement. You have to get civic engagement concerted around their life, and it has to be a year-round type of engagement. It cannot be the same people that come out and like, hey, I want to register you to vote because it's election time again, and then you disappear. It's about building relationships with those people. And that's definitely point one of building relationships. And you will see how much people would let down their walls and get you involved. And then you could know how to navigate to civic engagement in that manner.
Well, I think that's, yes, you're quite right about that. And we're trying to get people concerned. That's what the CACs were for. I mean, that's what they were all about. What are the concerns in your community? And you had the opportunity every month to go to a meeting and bring a concern or listen to other people's concerns and talk to your neighbors. And that's what's been all but eliminated. Some of the CACs are still meeting, but the majority of them are not anymore since the council cut them off.
May I
Yes.
respond
Please.
to that question from a little bit of a different perspective?
Sure.
I appreciate what Wanda says, and every bit of civic engagement I've done over the years with Bob Hall is where I started. It's all about finding out what matters to the people. But white people, if we vote our self-interest, we're voting against, in many cases, the interest of our neighbors in the Black community. People in my neighborhood love it that our houses are quadrupling in value. But that's happening because downtown Raleigh is being developed, and the housing there is quite expensive, and it's raising the value of our homes. COVID, if it has taught us anything, is that we are all in this together until we realize that what happens to my neighbor affects me, and what happens to me affects my neighbor, and that the community is better when we function keeping each other in mind. Again, getting to the yes instead of my way or the highway. How do we get to the yes? This works for the white community. This works for the Black and other minority communities. We can move forward as a city together, not leaving any segment behind. So I would just add that piece in addition to what Wanda said, not instead of, but just in addition to.
Yes, I agree. And remember, the CACs had a body called the RCAC, which consisted of the officers of the 18 CACs. So not only did the CAC address community interests, but the leaders of that CAC went to a meeting once a month where they talked about city interests and listened to the interests and concerns of people from 17 other communities. So there was a network of engaged people in this city paying attention to one another, and it wasn't all self-interest. In fact, I had some experience with that. There wasn't a whole lot of self-interest involved in it. It was mostly, let's see if we can lift up the larger interest of the city and see if we can get the development industry to look at it too. So I need to wrap this up because now I want to turn this over to Tim Niles to talk about the recall effort, and he'll take any questions you have about that. But we're pretty determined to get this recall if we can. So Tim, well, what are we doing and how are we doing?
Okay, well, thank you. I'm Tim Niles, and I want to thank everyone for attending tonight's program, What's Next for Democracy in Raleigh? And I'm here to introduce you to what we think is the best answer to that question, Deliver 5 for Democracy. Deliver 5 for Democracy is the next phase of the Recall Mayor Baldwin campaign, and we are asking each of you here tonight to help us change the leadership in Raleigh and thus bring democracy back to Raleigh. In the first month of the recall campaign, we have surpassed our initial milestone of 1,000 signatures. And now we are asking everyone who is a supporter of the recall to participate in Deliver 5 for Democracy. This means we're asking everyone who has already signed a petition to step up and help us get 5 more signatures. And we're asking all of you to join us by getting 5 signatures on a petition form yourself. We're also reaching out to our rapidly growing audience of over 10,000 people who read our weekly email newsletter, The Week Ahead, to become an ambassador for democracy as well by participating in Deliver 5 for Democracy. This is the only way we can reach our goal of 14,000 signatures. We need your help. This is a simple process. First, get a petition form, and there are 3 ways you can do this. You can download it from our Livable Raleigh website. This is the fastest way you can get started. Go to our website and find our new Deliver 5 for Democracy page. Everything you need is right there. And we've put the link to this new page in the chat. Or come to one of our signing events and we'll give you the petition form and Deliver 5 for Democracy packet. There are a dozen signing events just this week. Or you can send us an email at livableraleigh@gmail.com with your mailing address, and we'll send you the information you need and the instructions. Second, we are asking each ambassador for democracy to get 5 signatures on their petition form. If you haven't already signed a form, one of those signatures can be yours. Yes, you can witness your own signature. Then all you need to do is ask 4 of your friends, family members, neighbors, or coworkers to sign the form with you. There is one very important instruction you must follow when gathering signatures. When signing the petition, you must fill it out with your name as it appears on your voter registration. This is easy to verify, and the information we provide to you has the link to the Wake County Board of Elections website where you can verify the information. And since you already know who you plan to ask to sign the petition because they're your friends and your neighbors, you can look their information up before you even meet with them. And then it's one less step you have to walk through with them as you get them to sign the petition. Third, as soon as you are finished collecting signatures, please email us at livableraleigh@gmail.com. Let us know who you are and how to reach you so we can arrange to help you get your petition forms notarized. Or if you prefer, you can go to your bank or a notary you know and ask them to notarize the petition. The final step is to make sure you send us the notarized forms so they can be counted towards our goal of 14,000 signatures. As I said, we have a dozen signing events this week alone. You can go to Clyde Cooper's Barbecue in downtown Raleigh any day, Tuesday through Saturday, from 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. If you're in the North Raleigh area, you can come to Millbrook Exchange Park tomorrow night from 4 to 7 p.m. If you're in Southeast Raleigh, you can go to the College Park neighborhood Thursday evening from 4:30 to 7:30. Wanda Hunter, our earlier speaker, is going to be gathering signatures on her front porch. On Saturday, we have events in North Raleigh at Deja Brew Coffee Shop from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. That's every Saturday, not just this Saturday. in South Raleigh at Eliza Pool Park this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., or in the Raven Ridge neighborhood from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And on Sunday, we'll be in Lake Lynn from noon to 3. You can always find a full listing of all the petition signing events on our website's calendar, and you can find that link to that calendar in the chat now. We need each and every one of you to become an ambassador for democracy. And if you have any questions about Deliver 5 for Democracy or the recall campaign, I can take those questions now, or we can also continue with your other questions that we have been taking. And let's just follow the same procedure we've been following. Put your questions in chat or raise your hand. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. That's excellent explanation. We need 14,000 signatures, just slightly less than that, because that's 1/4 of the number of people who voted in the 2019 city election. That would not be such a daunting task if we could collect them online, but we can't because they have to be notarized. So we need people to physically fill out, put their name on a petition and get their neighbors to do it as well, and then get a notary to attest to the fact that you saw your neighbors sign it and saw yourself sign it. This is sort of the essence of democracy. If people want to take government back in the city, this is far from the hardest thing we could choose to do. It's a fairly easy thing. The actual governing of the city is much harder, but the development industry is very capable of governing this city in their interests if you don't care enough to weigh in and push back against them. So do we have any other questions that we need to address? It is
Yes,
8:30.
we
Okay,
got
go ahead.
we got one question that I think would be important to address about explaining what it means that we will now no longer have runoffs, that we're going to plurality.
Oh, well, okay. So in most elections, there are primaries, a Democratic primary, a Republican primary, a Libertarian Party primary, because they're partisan elections. And then the winners of the primaries are the candidates who are on the November ballot. So there are usually 2 or 3 candidates on the November ballot. In our election, we have nonpartisan elections in Raleigh. So the candidates run, and whatever their party affiliation is, it is not listed on the ballot. So we have had, I think we had 6 candidates for mayor last time. We've had 10, 12, 14 people run for council seats. So our way of sorting out these large candidate fields without partisan primaries has been, let's take the top 2 candidates and have a runoff. And whoever gets the most votes in the runoff will be the majority choice. 2 candidates, one of them has to get more than 50%. That's what the numbers tell you. So without a runoff and without a primary, I predict we will have a dozen candidates for mayor or more next year in November. And I think this is intentional by Mayor Baldwin to eliminate the runoff, because she is the person who, first of all, has $500,000 in her campaign fund and the ability to buy television ads and the ability to do colorful mailings about what a great job she's done as mayor. And she has the name recognition. So who's going to beat her? Which of those 11 other candidates is going to beat her? And until you can get her one-on-one in a runoff, you will not have a chance. That's what the significance of this plurality election change is, as far as I'm concerned. And I guess there probably are other places in the country that have no primaries and no runoffs, but I don't know of another major city that has this kind of wide open election without any sorting mechanism at all. What are we looking at here about the Planning Commission? Oh, yes, William Twitty. Nicole Bennett is a superb member of the Planning Commission. I agree with you about that. And ironically, she was appointed by this council. Have to say that. And she replaced me. They threw me off. But I don't think they knew what they were getting in Nicole Bennett, because she is a terrific advocate for good community planning and community engagement. And, you know, I used to think I did an okay job on the Planning Commission, but I watch her in awe of the good job she's doing. But she's alone now, because I wasn't the only one they threw off the Planning Commission. They threw every other member off who ever questioned a development project. And when Nicole Bennett's term comes up, and it'll come up in a few months, they may throw her off too. I don't know. But right now, she's a lone voice on the Planning Commission for good planning. Yeah, somebody's put in the chat, we've lost Shelley Winters, Michelle McIntosh, Edie Jeffries, me, and David Novak. We were the ones who were citizen representatives. We're not part of the development industry. And again, to state it, and how many times do we have to state it? We're not anti-development. We're for good development. But the developers don't really want to be told that their projects to maximize their profits are not what the city needs. And they don't want to hear it when you say you really ought to add affordable housing, or you really ought to add additional stormwater controls, or you really ought to put some open space in that mega project of yours. They don't want to hear it.
So let me address a question I saw in chat about the recall.
Okay.
Some about a deadline for the signatures. There is no deadline for the signatures. We can take as long as we need to take to get the number of signatures we need. The way the process works is once we have enough signatures, we turn the petition documents into the city. It's the city clerk's job at that point to verify them and see if we have enough and if it's validated. If it is validated, the city clerk turns it over to the Wake County Board of Elections. And at that point, the Wake County Board of Elections is required to hold an election within 60 days of receiving the validated petition. So the timing is all based on when we get the petition's signatures that we need. There's no deadline.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I see Donna Bailey has her hand up, so
yeah, I
yeah.
do. I want to make a few comments regarding the change to the plurality vote. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. If people remember a number of years ago when Paul Coble was mayor and Charles Meeker ran against him, there were multiple people in that election, and Paul Coble had the most votes, but he did not get to 50%. So there was a runoff between Paul Coble and Charles Meeker, and Charles Meeker won. And that was the beginning of his 10-year reign in Raleigh, which was, excellent. Another time it happened was with Treasurer Janet Cowell when she was running. So it doesn't happen often, but we have to make sure that it is truly, the representative, that a majority of voters. I mean, we could elect somebody who has a 20% rate, the votes that they get. That means 80% of the people voted against him. And then the other comment I want to make is in all of the media, and even when people ask Mayor Baldwin, they only discuss the date change. No one is talking about the change to a plurality vote, which is a much bigger deal than the date change. It truly changes the way Raleigh votes and who gets elected. So I wish we had better media coverage so that people would understand that aspect of it.
And let me add one point to what Donna just said, because at a meeting we attended, a panel discussion we attended earlier this year, the coordinator of that discussion mentioned that there have been 6 runoff elections in a certain time period in Raleigh. And of those 6, 3 of them were won by the person who was in second place. So when people say it doesn't happen that often, I think if it happens 6 times and half of the time the person in second place wins, that's pretty dramatic. And throwing that out, it's like saying, you can't say that it doesn't happen or it very rarely happens when half of the time that it does happen, the other guy wins.
I also think that not having a runoff will encourage fringe candidates to file in hopes that in a field of 25 candidates, their 8% will be enough to win. They would have no hope of actually winning a majority of the votes in a runoff, but now there won't be a runoff. So, we could have a right-wing candidate, a left-wing candidate, a flat Earth candidate. We could have who's the singer? I'm blanking on his name.
I don't know,
Never
but in addition, I do want to bring it to everyone's attention. Mary Ann Baldwin did not win with the majority. She got 38%. So she is very motivated. She was very motivated to change the way Raleigh votes because it really favors her.
That's correct. She got 38%, and she's not getting any more popular.
She did. The runoff is at the discretion of the runner-up, and Charles Francis, who was in second place with 32%, I think, did not call for a runoff because he'd spent all his money by the time of the first election. Carolyn Guckert in the chat asks who might run against Mary Ann, and we know of one candidate who will, and that's Terrence Ruth. I like Terrence, but this is not a campaign event for Terrence.
Bob, you may not have seen it in chat, but Wanda Hunter has just informed us that Terrence Ruth has just filed to run as mayor.
Okay, well, I know he's announced that he's going to run, and he is running. He's out there running hard. Lubin Previtt says Michelle McIntosh resigned from the Planning Commission. I think that's true. I think that's because the handwriting was on the wall that when her term was up, they weren't going to reappoint her. That was the case with me. I mean, they didn't throw me off the Planning Commission. When my term ended, it would have been customary to reappoint me. That had always happened before, almost always. But in David Novak's case before me and then mine, we were not reappointed to a second term.
And Edie Jeffries also.
And Edie Jeffries the same. Edie when she was chair. And a very good chair of the Planning Commission. So Mary Ann has scoured this Planning Commission to remove any vestige of citizen interest. Well, we're now just prattling on, folks. So other questions, or anybody who hasn't spoken want to say something as we wrap it up? And I'm going to throw it back to Susan here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this wonderful community conversation this evening. I hope you felt that it was informative and that it's helped you understand a little bit more about what has happened with our city elections and how important that very basic democratic right is. And as Bob Hall said, it's a lot of work. It's not easy. Just ask any of us who are involved in the recall effort. I don't think any of us imagined how difficult it would be to go back to 1954 and have to collect as many signatures as we have to collect. That's why we need your help. Anybody who has signed a petition, please opt in for our Deliver 5 for Democracy. The only way we're going to get there is with the help of everyone who has already taken a step toward this petition. So thank you very, very much. We hope to see you at another Livable Raleigh virtual event soon. And thank you for your support. Good night.